All right, next up, we're going to talk about lenses. So everybody's got a different shooting style. Your collection of lenses might be totally different from mine. I'm going to give you recommendations on what I do and the type of shooting style that I have. It might not be what your style is. So I'm going to run through all the Sony native glass because that's what I shoot with, and I'll explain why. So right off the bat, I came from Canon, and I had a lot of Canon glass, which I've since sold, and I've used with adapters like the Comlight adapter. I used the Metabones adapter to adapt my Canon lenses on the a7R II. Now, the big thing I want to talk about with these lenses, they're fly-by-wire, most of these. And basically what that means is you can get really quick autofocus with these lenses. You can get really good continuous autofocus in video mode, which is good. But the big downside, the thing that you'll pull your hair out if you're the type of guy that does a lot of focus pulls. So meaning, let's say if I'm shooting two people, one's near and one's far, and you want to, in that particular scene, one person's talking, so you have it marked, and I'm going to just demonstrate in this the cheapest, most easiest way, I guess you could talk about. So maybe you have your finger right at the top of the lens, which is very common, what I do sometimes, and then maybe you mark off to the side where the second person is, and you're rack focusing between the two people as they talk, let's say. Might be a pretty common scenario if you're that type of shooter. So what happens like on fly-by-wire lenses is you can do it like with the Panasonic GH4 has this as well. And when you go back and forth, it for the most part on the Panasonic fly-by-wire lenses, it's repeatable. These lenses, most of these lenses anyway, it's not repeatable, and this is where you'd pull your hair out. So let's say you have one mark at the top and one mark at the side, and as I go back between the two, if I were to change the speed at which I'm rack focusing, it won't be repeatable. So let's say if I were to go extremely slow, well, I might go way past that mark, and it's still, that second person is still not in focus. I might be going all the way around and then find the person's focus. Likewise, if I go really quick, like a real jerky motion, I might get to that second person a lot faster. So the big thing about these lenses, if you're doing focus pulls, they're not repeatable. So you're going to be very frustrated. So if you're that type of shooter, a lot of the recommendations I'm going to be giving might not work for you, or what you might do is own a combination of lenses, ones that are fly-by-wire like these, because they do have benefits, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But if you're one of those type, maybe you get a Canon lens or a manual type of lens. There's like new lenses coming on the market all the time. Like I think there's Midicon, there's Rokinon, sorry. There's even new Zeiss lenses, the baddest lenses, which I haven't got my hands on yet because they're so darn popular that I haven't received any yet. But there's different FE type of lenses coming on the market all the time. So there might be more options for you by the time you're actually watching this, which would be great because I might buy some as well. So just to recap, these lenses I'm about to talk about might not meet your needs depending on your shooting style. But for me, I love doing photography. I want quick autofocus, which is great. And the other thing I want to talk about really quickly is the big benefit with these lenses is since they're native, and when you mount it on this camera, the camera knows what lens it is and says, hey, not only do I know what you are, I can correct for chromatic aberration for you on the fly, and for video, that's great. I can correct for barrel distortion or any sort of distortion that's going on, especially with wider lenses. That's great. And it could also say, I know this lens really well, and it's got some vignetting, especially when you go down to f4. I can get rid of that for you, which is great. Trying to do all that stuff in post later can be almost like super taxing on your computer, especially when you're correcting distortion. Even if you could. I mean, you can do those type of things in Lightroom with raw images, and that's great. But when you do it in video, it can be very difficult. So some of these lenses, when you couple it with this body, work extremely well because it's post-processing it's doing it on the fly in the camera for you as it's recording the video file. So that's a really big advantage. So you might be asking, why did I get rid of all my Canon glass? Basically, I've tried 3 different adapters. There's the Photo DX, there's the Comlight, and there's the Metabones. Metabones is the most expensive, probably the most popular, and it's getting better because you can actually update the firmware inside the adapter, and the autofocus is getting faster. They're fixing different things. More lenses are compatible with the Metabones. Like every month they seem like they're updating it, which is great. So there's definitely advantages buying the Metabones if you have a Canon glass like I used to. The big reason is I was shooting a volleyball game with the Canon 7200 2.8, which I love that lens, but within the frame I was getting these very low contrast areas, and there was the light source, a big window outside of the frame, and that light would kind of bounce through the adapter and would create these very low contrast areas. And I just got so fed up with it. I was just like, I'm done with Canon lenses. I just can't do it anymore. And like I've talked about, there's so many advantages of having the native glass from, the corrections that go on, the autofocus speed. I just decided to get all native glass. All right, my shirt might look different, my hair might look shorter. I was just editing this section and I didn't do a very clear job of it, so I want to redo this part. So we're going to talk about the mount and the native Sony glass that goes on it. Now, we're not talking about Canon or anything like that, but just basically the native stuff. I want to give some background. So the Sony came out in 2010 with the NEX line of cameras, and the NEX stood for Next E-Mount Experience. And that E within that phrase stands, from my understand, the E stands for 18 millimeters. So the distance between the flange and the sensor from here to here is 18 millimeters. If you're from Canon, that distance was like 44 millimeters from the flange to the sensor. So we basically, in Sony land, we've got two different types of lenses that we can mount onto the E mount. And that is a standard E lens, like this one, or an FE lens. So let me break that down to you. The FE, the F in the FE stands for full frame. So this covers the entire sensor, However, this lens, which is this is my 10-18, this lens is a standard E lens. It'll mount on the E mount, but it will not fill the entire sensor. However, as we talked about in the menu chapter, you can put the camera into APS-C, Super 35 mode, crop mode, basically, and this lens will work. But it's not going to fill the entire sensor. It's going to only fill a smaller portion of the sensor. All right, there's one other thing I want to clarify, especially on the photography side of things. If you do buy standard E lenses like this one, and you put the camera in APS-C mode, you're going to get about an 18 megapixel image. If you use the FE lenses and you're in full frame mode, you're going to get 42 megapixels. So a big difference. So you might want to invest in FE glass where you can. There's some reasons I've chosen like this lens because it's really small and lightweight. If you compare this lens to the 16-35, that thing is massive, and I can't mount it on my gimbal. So there's some reasons why I've purchased these lenses. But for the most part, you want to kind of steer towards more of the FE lenses when you're buying lenses. And we're going to cover lenses in a lot more detail later. All right, so when you go to shop for your lenses, you're going to run into a lot of different acronyms or symbols and stuff like that. I thought I'd run through those really quickly. Again, the E stands for standard E mount. FE stands for full frame. The next one is the G, stands for gold. On the Wikipedia page, it says it's like G stands for their gold, I guess, is their best. This is their best lens. They're top of the line. I guess if you're coming from Canon, you see that red band around the lens. That stands for like their best glass that they have. The next thing is the OSS. You'll see that written either on the lens or when you're on the B&H page or Amazon, wherever you're looking. That stands for optical steady shot, like this lens has it. Again, you don't really have to you can buy primes now and still get the stabilization because it's built on to the sensor, which is great. PZ stands for power zoom. This one is a power zoom, has a little rocker switch, has about maybe 2 or 3 speeds to it, and you can push up and push down. This one also is a power zoom. Next one is LE, that stands for light addition. Then you might see a T with a star next to it. I believe that just stands for the coating of the optics. The coating I don't know, you'll actually see it written on like on the B&H page. Sometimes it's not actually written on the lens itself. You might see a T-star somewhere. I think this one has it. No, I can't find it. But if you actually look on the viewfinder of the A7R2, you'll actually see a T with a star next to it. So I believe that's just a high-end coating that they use. And T-star is maybe a Zeiss branded item. I'm not an optical genius here. I don't have a whole bunch of history with Zeiss, so I think that's what that stands for. So if you get it, it's usually you're going to pay more, and it's hopefully a better coating. And then the last one I talk about is ZA. You might see that written, or you might actually see the Zeiss logo. And so the ZA stands for Zeiss Alpha. So what does that mean? It means that Sony designed this lens. Sony made this lens, but I guess Sony gave the design over to Zeiss. Zeiss said, yep, you're on the right track, or yeah, we approve it. I don't know exactly what the agreement is with the two companies, but this is not made by Zeiss. It's not designed by Zeiss, but it carries the Zeiss logo on it, and that's what the ZA stands for. It's Zeiss Alpha. So those are kind of the acronyms that might help you while you're choosing your Sony lenses. All right, Sony makes other cameras. I guess from their past, they maybe purchased Minolta a long time ago, and there's another mount. I believe it's called the A mount. I don't know much about it. I've never used it, but if you want, or you have a whole bunch of old Sony glass, maybe A mount glass, and you want to use it on this camera, you can get an adapter. I think it's called the LAEA4 adapter. Comes in around 350 bucks, but it'll transfer all the autofocus and the aperture and all that great stuff to this camera as well. I'm going to talk about each individual lens next and how I use it. This is 35mm f2.8, kind of expensive, around $800. I think I bought this one used. Yeah, I think I did. I think I maybe bought for like $600 used. The reason I like it is it's because it's so small, and it's a good focal length for like street photography, or if you're out with your family and you want to just travel super light, this is a great lens to take. It's not the most sharpest lens out there. In fact, I was really surprised. I ran a bunch of tests where I put newspaper up on the wall, took a bunch of pictures at like f2.8, f4, f8, f16, f22 is usually what I do. And then I look in the center and I look in the corners. I look for contrast, I look for vignetting. This lens and this lens, which are zooms, are actually better, sharper than this lens, better vignetting, better in the center and the corners than this lens, which is really surprising because usually primes, and this is a prime, it's not a zoom, it only does one thing, are usually sharper. This is not sharper. And for 800 bucks, that's kind of a, and it's got the Zeiss name on it. So I'm kind of surprised the quality is not quite there on this lens. It's pretty expensive. Now, if you wanted to, and you do like 35mm and you want a better lens, I've never tried it. Sony makes an f1.4 version of this lens with twice the price. It's $1,600. So a lot more money. But for me, to be honest, I use this lens a lot, especially when I'm out with my family. This is a great lens for that. All right, next up is the 10-18. Not the sharpest lens around, not the cheapest either. This is, I believe, $850. The equivalent to this, I believe, is 15 to 27mm in full frame speak. So this lens is not sharp. It's got some vignetting. It's got optical steady shot. It doesn't have the Zeiss branding. It's kind of expensive. There's another one out there that you can buy that's an FE mount or FE lens, and that is the 16 to 35. It's sharper than this. I've tested it. It's a better lens all around. So you might be asking, why did I buy this one? I bought this one because this lens works really well. It's super lightweight, and it works on the A7R2 in Super 35 mode. Works great, and it works great on my 3-axis gimbal, the Pilot Fly. If there's no way I can put the 16 to 35. It's too big, it's too long, it's too heavy. It won't balance on that particular gimbal. So for this, it works great. Now, there are instances when I do want to use all 42 megapixels in a landscape, and this is a very wide lens, which is great for landscapes. If I set it to about 16 or 15.5, I noticed that I will not see the inside of the camera, and you can actually get a good shot. But that's the only place that you can use this in full frame mode. So you can definitely, you can move the switch around and say I want it to be in full frame mode or crop mode, and it'll still work. But if you go to like 10, you'll definitely see the inside of the camera. So that won't work all the time. Next up is the 55 mil. It's a f1.8. So this is the fastest lens I own from Sony. And I gotta tell you, comes with a premium price. This is about $1,000, but this lens is probably the sharpest lens I have ever used, including Canon. It's about around the 50 millimeter length. It's just amazing. It hardly has any vignetting. It's super sharp in the corners, even down to like 2.8. Wicked sharp in the corners. F1.8, it does get a little bit smeary, but it's not too bad. And it's rock solid all the way up to f16. It's wicked sharp. So if you're looking for super detailed shots, this is definitely one to get. Again, it comes in $1,000. And then if you come from like Canon, you're like, well, I could have gotten a 1.8 from Canon for $125. Why is this thing $1,000? It really is good. It's better than the 1.8 from Canon. Really solid performer, but it is expensive. Actually, I bought this one used. Actually, I think I want to say I spent maybe $600 or $700 on it. I think I bought it off of Craigslist, or actually an individual, which is a pretty good price. You know, the used market, you can definitely buy used, or you can buy gray list. Some of these items I've actually bought from Japan on the gray list, and they're substantially cheaper than buying it off of B&H. I know I have an affiliation with B&H. I'm not trying to force B&H down your throat or anything. You can definitely buy from that, but I've had really good luck with one particular vendor from Japan, which I can't remember their name right off the top of my head, but they've been very good at supplying. I bought this one, I bought this one from them, I bought this one from them, and I bought this one from them, from Japan Gray Market, and I've saved a lot of money. All right, next up is the Zeiss branded 24-70. This should be kind of your workhorse of a lens because it covers, you know, the most commonly used focal length. However, it's funny because I just got an email saying I just sold it on eBay. I think it sold for like $775. I think I bought it. I bought this gray market for, I don't know, $850 or something like that. And I think brand new, this lens cost, I don't know, $1,200 or something like that. I can't remember the exact numbers, but the reason I'm selling this lens is kind of what this lens, the next lens I'm going to talk about. This is a good lens. It's pretty sharp. I was kind of disappointed at some of the stills that I've taken at 24 millimeters. There is a bit of too much distortion in the corners for my personal taste. So hopefully I'll improve upon that on the next version of this lens that Sony's making. Again, you know, I think it goes back to 2013 when the FE line of cameras came out, FE lenses. So they're playing catch up, and developing lenses must be very difficult because they don't come out that often, that quickly, like the camera bodies do. So there must be a ton of engineering that goes into this. So as time goes on, and hopefully like Sigma and Tamron and some of the other third-party vendors will actually start developing FE glass as well, and then we'll have a lot more choices to choose from. All right, next up is it's kind of an unlikely one. You might be wondering why I purchased this one, and in fact, I just got this one. And I got it in to explain all this stuff because I wanted to get a power zoom in to show, you know, in the menu section and stuff like that. I ended up loving this lens, and I picked one up, and it's not that expensive. It's around $600. So 18, it's an f4 lens, constant f4, like most of these, except for the primes. But it's a 18 to 105. So that equivalent comes out to around 27 to 157, I believe, in full frame. So it's really, really wide, and it's quite a bit telephoto. Not as telephoto as the 70-200, which we'll get to here in a minute, but it covers quite a bit when you're in the APS-C mode. You can't use this in full frame mode on this camera. So you might like, well, why did you buy it? And the big reason is the rocker switch. So if you're doing a sort of news gathering, or for me, the reason I love this lens is like sports. For instance, my daughter does a lot of swimming, and I was using this the other day, and as she's coming towards me, I just put it on continuous autofocus, and it works really well. I mean, it's wicked smooth. If I were to try to actually reach for the barrel and try to do it myself, the zooming, it would be all over the place. Even with optical or 5-axis stabilization turned on, you wouldn't get the same results, and you wouldn't get that nice, super smooth. It's almost like you're zooming in on the person, as the person's going away from you, it's still tracking them and they're staying the same size in the frame. And for me, I love that look. So it's definitely not the sharpest lens. I've actually compared it to this lens and the 24-70, and this is not very good in terms of sharpness. So I wouldn't use it like in an interview situation or a landscape situation or something like that. But if you're using sports or you're doing run and gun, the type of work that I do, and you're using continuous autofocus and you're using the power zoom, this is a good lens. It's only $600. It's got the G on it, and I don't know what, like I said before, the G is supposed to stand for something like great or good or something like that, but it's not optically the best lens out there. But I highly recommend it if you're doing any sort of news gathering or sports work like I do. Our next up is the 70-200. This is an f4 lens. It's an FE lens, so it works both in crop mode or Super 35. I like it. I like it because it's size and weight. The thing I don't like about it, it's not an f2.8. Like, I came from Canon. I had the Canon 70-200 f2.8, and I really love that lens. This one is pretty darn good. Autofocus is fast. Continuous autofocus in video mode is also pretty good with this lens. There's not much to say about it. I'm mostly just disappointed it's not 2.8. And hopefully, like I said before, there's other manufacturers coming out. Hopefully Sigma will make one, or maybe even today when Sony does their announcement, they'll actually come out with a 2.8 version of this lens. It's kind of expensive, or it's $1,500. I guess that's priced about right. There's some of these lenses I don't think are priced right, but I think this one is priced about right. The last one I want to talk about is the 28-135. So that is the full frame number. So it's got a pretty large zoom. And the reason I got this in, I don't actually own this one, is I wanted to compare it against this one, which these cover similar ranges and they're both power zooms. This one is far superior. It's sharper in the corners, sharper in the center, less vignetting than this one. It's a far superior lens. This one again is $600. This one is $2,500. This one is big, heavy, bulky. One of the things I don't like about this is the lens cap. There's no cap. You can't just put a cap in and put it in your camera bag. You have to, the only way you can protect or cover the lens and click that in place is to cap it off like this. And that's kind of the reason. I know it sounds terrible, but I'm not into big and bulky. And this is only an f4. It's a constant f4. It's not even a 2.8. If it was 2.8, I might consider it, but man, there's a lot of glass here. I would think this would be like a 2.8, and at $2,500, you think they would give that to us. But for some reason, Sony just loves zooms at f4. And this one has a whole bunch of gearing on here. And now, going back to what I talked about originally by fly-by-wire and autofocus, the autofocus on this in stills modes works just as good as this one, just as fast as this zoom, the 24-70. In low light, all these slow down just a little bit, but for the most part, autofocus works extremely fast. Now, the big difference with this lens compared to all these other ones, it's not, when you go use you can see where I'm going up and down. You can have it in autofocus mode or full manual. So in manual mode, you can actually repeat a focus pull. So if you marked off the lens or you have gearing or whatever, you can actually use this lens and you will not bang your head getting frustrated. Focus between one mark and another. It's repeatable. It's perfectly repeatable. And I think it has about 100, I think I measured it once, it was about 130 degree rotation of going from super close in to distant focus. So all around, pretty good lens. It's far superior than this one, but I ended up purchasing this one. It's just, to me, this one's just, for my shooting style, it was just too big and bulky and didn't fit in my camera bag really well. All right, next up we're talking about focus. As you can see, I've got a doll here and I've got another doll. They don't complain in terms of talent. They just sit there. I just grabbed a couple of them out of the basement. My girls don't play with them anymore. But anyway, we're talking about focus. Of all the things that we have already talked about, like exposure, white balance, a lot of that stuff you can, for the most part, you can fix in post. Now, when it comes to focus, that's something you can't fix in post with this camera. If you're wildly off, out of focus, it's definitely going to show. Also, you'll notice I got my iPhone right here. It's recording the back of the screen because I need to use this sometimes when we're using focus peaking, which is we're going to talk about next. And I can't record the overlays, those overlays on the Shogun. So that's why you see the iPhone right here. So what I do is an experiment and just see how well I do. And you're going to kind of get some ideas maybe on how you want to manually focus, because that's what we're going to cover here first. I've got like 2 subjects. The dolls never complain, so this is a great way to start. So what I'm going to do is on the Shogun, I've got some really nice peaking on that monitor. It's fantastic. It's really accurate. And then on this screen, I have got peaking turned off. As you can see, there's no peaking. And I'm not going to use the EVF. I'm just going to use the back of the screen. And I'm going to try to go from one subject to another. And then later, I'm not going to cheat. And then I'll look over to see how well I did. So first thing is we're going to go to the distant doll. And I'm going to say, now you're going to notice, you're like, Dave, you're at F8. That should be easy. It should be. Okay, I think I've got it. Now I look over here and see how I did. Actually, I didn't do too bad. I'd say that's about, I was really close. Now let's go to the closest doll. This is harder. She doesn't have much contrast in her eyes. This is very hard. So let's see how I did. Sorry for the dogs barking if you can hear that. I was pretty close on that one too. So all right, let's make this a little bit more difficult on myself. I'm going to bring the ISO down to, I don't know, about 125. And we're going to bring that f-stop. Yeah, we're going to open it up. Let's see how well I do here. Maybe about right here. Let's go with 2.2, because if I were ever doing a focus pull on 2.2, that would be very difficult. All right, let's try this again. So I'm going to go to the distant doll. Again, this is just for your purposes to see, you know, what it's like. All right, so I think I've got her. I'm again looking at the back of the screen. Now I'm looking at the peaking on the Shogun, which obviously you guys can't see, but yeah, I was way off. See, right about there is where it looks to be most in focus, especially her eyes. That's what I'm focusing on. All right, so let's go to the closest doll, and let's see how I do. It's not easy. All right, let's see how I did. No, I wasn't even close. See, right about there is where it's in focus. Yeah, so it's really difficult to do without any tools like that, especially f2.2. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my peaking on. Let's turn it on to high. And now I can see, as you can see here, you can see it. There's a whole bunch of stuff around her eyes. So let's go to the other doll. Let's see how I do. See, I can see it turning red. See how red her eyes are? So what I'm going to try to do next is I'm going to actually take the peaking. I'm going to bring it down maybe right here. So there's not so much red. I'd say maybe right about here. Let's see how I did. Yeah, I did pretty well. I'd say I got that one. All right, let's do this to the closest one. Let's see how I do. I'd say maybe right here. And then let's look at the Shogun. Yeah, I was pretty good. That was a lot closer. All right, now for the next exercise to watch me struggle. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna focus on the far girl. And this time I'm gonna use another aid. We're gonna actually, let's go ahead and turn off peaking. And what I'm gonna do is use the C1 button. So I'm gonna put the C1 button and press it again. And then I've got it zoomed in. And I'm gonna try to get her those eyes the best I can. Maybe right there. Let's see how I did. Yeah, I was pretty darn close. I'd say I was pretty spot on with that one. So let's try the other doll, which actually has much lower contrast eyes, if that's even a way to say it. I'm not looking for the eyelash. I'm looking for more the kind of reflection off of her pupil. And I was off. Yeah, that to me, right. Let's see. On the Shogun, I can see the eyelashes in focus. I'd say right about there. So I think I was off just a little bit. So the focus aids on here are kind of tough. Now, here's the thing I wanted to really demonstrate. I'm going to zoom back out again. Now, remember when I talked about in the other chapter, what was it? It's been so long ago. The menu chapter. And I talked about how you can actually go into stills mode, and there's some more advanced features for us there. And one of the big ones is this. Let's I'm going to bring up the C1 box again. Let's do it to the distant doll again. And I'd go punch once, and let's go ahead and get the focus. And what's cool is we got the you can see she's about 2 meters away, and I'm going to press again. It's like, whoa, yeah, that's much better. Now I can see what I'm doing. And I'd say I'm right, focus right there. And sure enough, let's see how I did. Oh yeah. Yeah. I was really, really close, if not perfect. So if you run into a situation where you want to get critical focus, switch over to photography mode. All I did was go from movie mode to the M mode. And then you punch in twice. See, we're at a magnification of X 8.1, and the other one was a magnification of like 3.3. Again, these numbers are going to change whether you're in crop mode or full frame mode. A lot of different things going on there, but basically you want to punch in as far as you can like this, and then you'll be able to grab hold of that focus a lot more accurately. All right, so one question you might have is, does peaking work better at 4K than 1080? So let's take a look. So right now we go into the menu, you can see that we're in 4K. And what I'm going to do is focus on that the far doll, and I'm in the M mode still, so we can go critical focus. And what I'm going to do is turn peaking on to, I don't know, maybe let's try mid. I'm going to punch once, twice, 3 times. And let's go ahead and focus. And boy, I don't see much red at all, so let's go back out again. Go to high. Punch once, twice, 3 times. And now you see, like right there, you see that red stuff forming around her, that reflective part of her eye. And if I go and look at the Shogun, which I know you can't see, I'm running out of cameras at this point. Shogun shows about right there. And sure enough, you can see all that red stuff forming around the pupil of her eye. So we know we're good. So this is 4K. Now we're going to switch to 1080. So we're going to go to menu. Now 1080. So I'm actually should be sending, and I am sending a 1080 signal out to the Shogun as well. So I'm going to go punch in once, twice, 3 times. And of course it's still focused the way it was before, but I'm going to say there's absolutely no difference between focus peaking in 4K versus 1080, because the experience I'm having right now is exactly the same. All right, next up we're going to move from manual focus to DMF. And we're in M mode, not movie mode, M mode. So we're in a still photography kind of mode. Now, let me show you one of the shortcomings to this. It's really cool, like I demonstrated before in the menu chapter, when you press the shutter halfway down and you rotate the barrel, you can actually like fine tune on this particular, it's actually one of my blowers, and it works great. The problem is it only selects the things that's closest, and I can bring up the box, but this happens. You know, when I hit C1, I'm trying to, where's the box? I can't see the zoom box. So we're not allowed to do that. So we're only allowed to really take the closest object. So if I were to take this out of the frame, let's say there's nothing right there, and it's going to pick her basically. And then now I can't see exactly where, if I use the up arrow key, now I can see her eye, and now I can get focus. Then I release. It just doesn't work that well. While it might be kind of a powerful tool for some situations, when you have foreground objects, it might not be the best. All right, I'm in movie mode, and I've turned it to 1080, and I've turned on continuous autofocus. And I press the shutter halfway down, it locks on to kind of her face, even though it really should lock on to the close. There it goes, it's locking onto the closest object, which is not what we want to do. We want to focus on their faces. So, in the function menu area, I've assigned, remember I assigned it to here so I could quickly go to turn face detection turned on. As soon as we do it, you see that we've got 2 boxes. And I had actually changed this to f2.8, because f2.2, the distant girl was so blurred out that the camera didn't even recognize it was a face. So in this instance, I mean, we've got a kind of an extreme example going on here because she's so close to the camera. So what I'm going to do is now if I press the shutter halfway down, you'll see it locks on to her face and turns green. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to the function button right here, and I'm going to, instead of it having face detection on, I'm going to turn on face detection on with registered faces and watch what happens. You see how it went to that girl right there? Well, what I did is I actually registered her face, which I thought was really cool because these dolls from American Girl doll, when my girls had them, I gotta say their faces look really similar. There's not many differences, and I think it looks at geometry. It measures the distance of the eye, the mouth, the nose, and all that stuff. You would think they look so similar, but the camera actually detects it, which is pretty amazing. So if you have a bride, let's say the distant girl is the bride, and this is the bridesmaid, it'll know to always focus on the bride, which is pretty darn cool. So let me show you. So I'm going to go out of movie mode because I can't do this in movie mode. I'm going to the M mode. I'm going to go here and go all the way where it says face detection. Now I already registered the faces by just taking a picture. It's pretty easy. You just say new registration, you fill the frame with their face and take a picture. It's really easy. But you can change the order. So what I'm going to do now is take her face, and I'm just going to cursor to the left and then press the set button. Wait a second, and then boom, now she is the priority. So now if I turn it this way, and let's pretend she is the bride and she's the bridesmaid, then boom, we've got it. And you can see that it's detecting the other face. It's got kind of a magenta kind of box around the other girl's face. Now what would be really cool, like I kind of talked about before, is if it had a touchscreen. Then you could just basically touch on the face that you want it to focus on, autofocus, and that would be great. And we've already kind of talked about, I've showed you examples of as soon as the person turns their head or anything like that, then this doesn't work very well. But if you're in a situation like this, maybe both of your talent, your actors or whatever are facing the camera, you might try using this. It could be a valuable tool. One more experiment I want to try, and I don't even know the outcome of this one, is how good is the autofocus and what does it autofocus on. So I've changed the aperture down to f1.8. So it should have a really, really thin, shallow depth of field. And right now I'm in movie mode. I'm on continuous autofocus, and as you can see, it's locked on to her. I'll just to make sure, you see how it turned green? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this to manual focus. I'm going to try not to touch the barrel or move the camera or do anything very sensitive. So what I'm going to do is go to M mode because we can really zoom in. And I'm going to take the bounding box or zoom box or whatever you want to call it and zoom in on this one eye. And let's see what it focused on. So I don't want it to focus on the eyelash. I want it to focus kind of like on that reflective part of her pupil. If you can actually call it a pupil on a doll. And I'm looking at the Shogun, and it looks like it took the eyelash. So if I move it around here, what I wanted it to focus on was like right there. Very subtle difference. And in fact, I don't see the peaking on her eyelash anymore. And as you can see, well, I'm looking at, as you can't see, but I'm looking at the Shogun, I can see that I've got just that reflective part of her eye in focus. So the continuous autofocus is looking for the great amount of contrast. It's not, what's really cool, it didn't take the tip of her nose, which was great. It did take her eye, it just took the eyelash. And again, it's a doll, so a normal human being might have a different geometry to eyelash, so it might be very different. All right, dolls are very stationary, they don't move, but in terms of autofocus, what I want to do is show you some examples of stuff I've already shot in terms of the two different parameters that we have with autofocus that we've talked about before. So let's go take a look at some of the footage now. All right, shooting video in autofocus mode can be a very polarizing subject for some shooters. For me, I don't mind using it. Here at f4, there's no way I could do that manually. Or doing such a smooth transition from one object to another autofocus wise. There's just no way. Or in this case, snapping into focus like this at f2.8. And here, autofocus does not work well. Like right here, I wanted the diver to be in focus, but it picked all the girls' faces behind the diver. So that case doesn't work. What right here works really well, like panning down the bench, each individual face like perfectly in focus. All right, so we're gonna step through all the different drive speeds and track sensitivities to kind of give you an idea of what's going on here so we can dissect it. We're gonna do this in slow motion so you can see exactly what's happening. So drive speed, there's fast and slow and another option as well. Basically, it's just how fast is the autofocus motor going. Now sensitivity, the algorithm, I guess inside the camera of like, you know, something's entering the frame, it sees a new face, you know, how sensitive do you want it to start autofocusing? And right now we have the sensitivity set too high. So watch what happens. So she's walking away, it looks good, it's tracking her. Then all of a sudden, boom, we saw something enter the frame. And now you can see she's not tack sharp anymore because it confused it because the sensitivity is so high. So let's continue. And now it grabbed the head coach down at the other end of the floor. Let's see what happens next. Somebody's entering the frame again, so watch what happens. Grabs the head coach. Now, I don't have any faces registered, and I do have face detection turned on, so it grabbed her face. Now watch what happens next. She's walking towards the camera. In fact, now her eyes are out of the frame, and yet still it's got her locked on. So it's taking the nearest object. As she's walking away, still, like, her eyes are just tack sharp. For me to do that manually would be very, very difficult. All right, now, this is a great example. I have face detection turned off, and look what's happening. The net is not in focus. The net's not in focus, all the faces are, and I have face detection turned off, so I was like, oh, wait a minute, let me check this out. And sure enough, it focuses on the actual net when you take a face out of it. Now I'm going to pan to the left again, panning to the left, and as it sees more faces, the algorithm's going to say, oh, I'm going to put priority on faces. So even when face detection is turned off, it's amazing how this algorithm still works. Now we've changed it up a little bit, so drive speed is still slow, but now we've changed track sensitivity to normal. And you can kind of see what's happening here. It kind of goes in and out of focus a little bit, but not too bad. All right, here's another example. This is kind of a lot of different planes of focus from very near to very far. And I was just kind of randomly moving the camera around to see how it would react. Track sensitivity this time is set to normal. Now where you're going to run into problems is an example like right here where you have the drive speed set to fast. Now watch what happens. The sensitivity is set to high. So you're going to see right about here, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So next up, I'm going to take this tree example. And the first one we're going to show you is drive speed fast, track sensitivity normal. And watch what happens. Here, I'll hit play. So it moves over and it goes womp, 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 womp. See how it got all confused? Even when we go back, it'll go womp, womp, womp right there. It's not so much the track sensitivity being an issue, it's more of the drive speed. When you set it too fast, you'll get that kind of in and out effect. I would almost recommend not using fast. Let's move on to the next one. So now we got drive speed slow, track sensitivity high, and that's a nice smooth transition. All right, now we got normal and track sensitivity high. And that worked pretty well. And moving back, that worked pretty well. Again, it's one of those things where I say kind of stay away from the fast drive speed. All right, let's take a look at this example. Here's, again, drive speed fast. And you can see as it doesn't have much to focus on when the girl is underwater, but when she comes up, it tries to grab hold of her. And as you can see here, it's just getting very confused, especially right about here. You can see it's going in and out. But now if we change the drive speed to normal, now the track sensitivity is set to high, it does pretty well. A lot better than when the drive speed is set too high. Now, when she goes underwater, there's not much for it to grab onto because the lane lines are off to the left, and sometimes they're in the frame and sometimes they're not in the frame. So next up is drive speed slow and track sensitivity normal. And this one does pretty well. Again, she's moving away from the camera, and I'm actually zooming with my power zoom as she's moving farther away. So it's really hard to do zooming and focus, manual focus at the same time. So that's why I'm just zooming and having the camera do the autofocus for me. Here we are at drive speed slow, track sensitivity high. And I think this is probably one of the better ones right here. For the most part, I mean, it gets really tough because the camera, when she goes underwater, it's like not much to focus on. All right, here's another example of volleyball with the drive speed fast and sensitivity high. Sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't. You know, it's grabbing those faces quite well. And also, I'm zooming really fast. It doesn't look like it, but I'm zooming in and out really fast on this 7200. It's not a power zoom, so it kind of confuses the lens, I think, a little bit when I go so fast. When I do these kind of whip zooms, I guess you could almost call them. Here again, we've got drive speed fast, sensitivity high on a serve. Let's see if we can track that ball. She serves it, tracks it pretty well. Now I am considerable distance away, and it is kind of almost on the same plane, but I am shooting all this at f4, and you can see it lost it right there. So my advice here is really to stay away from the drive speed fast if you're kind of getting this kind of in and out effect, and bring it down a notch. But overall, like this shot right here, I think it's a powerful tool, and I think you should definitely look at using it. Dun, dun, dun. We've reached the end of the course. Congratulations for making it through all 6 hours, because as I was editing it, I noticed I'm just a little over 6 hours on this course. Hopefully, all these tests that I've done will get you up to speed so much quicker, so you're not going to have to run them yourself, from like sharpness to exposure to white balance to whatever it is, picture styles. You'll know how to start shooting right away and get some pretty decent results out of it. Now it's gonna take some practice. You're gonna need to do a lot of different things, especially when it comes to focusing. There's just no substitute for just getting out there and getting to know your camera. But hopefully these last 6 hours has laid the groundwork for you to get up to speed pretty quickly. Now, if you're interested, I've got a friend of mine, Michael Andrew, on the still side of things. If you're looking for more content on this particular camera, he has a course just on the a7R II for photography. I don't know exactly how long his courses are. I think maybe 3 or 4 hours long, for about the same cost. So if you're looking for something to elevate your game in terms of photography, I'll put a link below to that. Also, in terms of other links, I'll put links to like my gear page below, links to the color grading courses that I talked about before, because if you're really interested in color grading, you shouldn't be learning it from me. You should be learning it from those people that I'll put links down below. I'll put a link to the online manual down below and a few other things. So again, thank you so much for sticking with me for the last 6 hours, and I hope you enjoy the camera.